Wedding days are supposed to be the beginning of a lifetime. A new chapter filled with hope, promises, and dreams shared between two souls. But sometimes the day is meant to start forever, becomes the moment everything ends. In these stories, celebration turned into chaos, and joy was replaced by tragedy in ways no one could have imagined. One moment, Park Young-woo was smiling, adjusting his tie for the perfect photo. The next, his screams were swallowed by the waves, and his bride watched helplessly as the ocean claimed her future. This was supposed to be a moment of beauty, a snapshot to remember forever. Instead, it became one of the most tragic wedding day deaths ever recorded. It was February 27, 2016 in Busan, South Korea. 32-year-old Park Young-woo and his fiancée had been inseparable for nearly a decade. Friends described them as a pair who could finish each other's sentences, whose love had weathered years of long nights, arguments, and distance. Now, finally, they were about to marry. Before heading to the venue, the couple insisted on one last photo shoot. They chose the rocky coastline, a place where waves crashed dramatically against jagged cliffs, where the wind could sculpt hair and dresses into perfect motion. The morning seemed innocent. Clear skies stretched overhead, the sun soft on the horizon, a gentle wind brushing their cheeks. Nothing hinted at the danger lurking just meters away. Yet anyone familiar with this stretch of coast knows the ocean's secret. When the tide turns, it does so without mercy. Park stepped onto a wet rock, careful at first, but confident enough to pose for a solo shot. His bride held her dress, her laughter echoing. The photographer crouched, adjusting the lens. Everything seemed perfect. The waves lapped softly at the rocks beneath their feet. And then, a sound split the air. A deep, rolling crack. A rogue wave. It rose like a wall of glass, frothing and violent. It hit Park with the force of a battering ram, slamming him off balance. His arms flailed instinctively, grasping at air, at nothing, as the water pulled him under. Witnesses on shore froze. They screamed. They shouted his name. But the ocean responded with silence, relentless and cold. For a fleeting second he surfaced, arms flailing, mouth open, voice hoarse from shouting, but the next wave hit. And just like that, he disappeared beneath the frothy chaos. The wind carried his bride's scream along the cliffs as she ran toward the edge, her dress soaked, her heart hammering against her chest. The photographer dropped the camera, lungs heaving, trying to reach him, but the waves were faster, stronger, and merciless. Seconds stretched into eternities. The water dragged him farther, twisting, spinning him, pushing him beyond sight. Friends and bystanders threw ropes, anything they could reach, but the current was a predator with no mercy. Each attempt ended in failure. Each moment increased the terror. Rescuers arrived, boats slicing through the waves, drones scanning from above. Hours passed, and finally they found him. Park Young-woo's body had been carried against the cliffs, battered by the sea. Still in his wedding attire. Still holding the ceremonial card tucked in his pocket. His bride collapsed, a shriek lost in the wind, the ocean indifferent to her grief. Moments that were supposed to start a lifetime together had ended in irreversible tragedy. The incident sent shockwaves across Busan and beyond. Discussions erupted about coastal photography safety, the dangers of Instagram-perfect poses, and how one impulsive decision can cost everything. The wedding, which should have been a celebration of love, became a memorial. And the photographer, haunted by what he had captured, refused to return to the cliffs for months. If you were standing there, would you have risked it for a perfect shot? Would you have convinced them to step back, or would you have captured the photo that became their last? The truth is, the line between beauty and danger is thinner than we imagine. And in a split second, one misstep can become a story remembered forever. But the tragedy doesn't end here. Because in another wedding not far from this one, a bride collapsed walking down the aisle, only for her sister to take her place moments later, stepping into a ceremony that would never feel the same again. Stories like these remind us of one thing. Even in moments of pure joy, life can shift in an instant. And when it does, there is no turning back. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, then nothing. In an instant, what was meant to be the happiest day of her life became a scene no one could have imagined. Her smile vanished. Her hands went limp. And the crowd, hundreds of wedding guests gathered to celebrate, erupted into panic. This is one of the most shocking wedding day tragedies ever recorded. It was February 14, 2018, Valentine's Day, in Ada, Uttar Pradesh, India. 17-year-old Surabhi was walking into the life her family had chosen for her. A traditional arranged marriage, a ceremony alive with drums, flowers, and the bright, intoxicating scent of marigolds. Guests had traveled from near and far. Families lined the hall, cameras ready, eyes shining with excitement. Surabhi herself glowed, her heart a mixture of nervous anticipation and joy. Her red silk sari shimmered under the lights. Her bridal jewelry jingled softly with each step. The air was thick with hope, expectation, and the unspoken belief that nothing could go wrong. Her father held her hand as she approached the groom. The groom's eyes met hers. Hands clasped. A faint, reassuring smile. This was supposed to be the moment that started their forever. Then, 10 steps in, the first sign that something was terribly wrong appeared. Her fingers twitched. Her shoulders slumped. A shiver ran across her frame. The music continued, oblivious to the impending disaster, until she swayed violently and collapsed. Gasp. Screams. Chaos. Guests screamed for help. Some thought she had fainted from the overwhelming heat, the tension, or nerves. Family members rushed forward. Friends tried to lift her. But the truth was worse than anyone could have imagined. Doctors and emergency responders arrived within minutes. The room fell silent as the verdict came. She was gone. A sudden, massive cardiac arrest had stolen her life before she even hit the floor. Her bridal attire, once a symbol of celebration, now felt like a funeral shroud. Her red silk sari, ornate jewelry, and garland lay in stark contrast to the absence of the life it was meant to honor. Her family collapsed in grief, inconsolable. Tears fell freely as screams and sobs echoed through the hall. But then, the unthinkable happened. Minutes later, in a private room behind the ceremony hall, the families made a decision that would shock the entire region. The wedding would continue. The groom, moments earlier watching his bride die, was asked to marry her younger sister. Immediately. That same day. That same hall. He agreed. Surabhi's body lay just rooms away as the wedding proceeded. Her sister donned a red sari and the music played once more. Drums, laughter, flowers, smiles, all carried on, a surreal contrast to the tragedy that had just occurred. Indian news outlets erupted in outrage. How can a wedding continue when the bride has just died? Some argued that tradition demanded life to move forward. Others called it cruel, inhumane, and heartless. Friends and relatives were divided. Some silently prayed. Others quietly left. Witnesses recalled the surreal dissonance, joy and grief colliding in the same space. No one could reconcile the laughter of one ceremony with the death that had just taken place mere meters away. And yet life moved forward. The groom performed his duties, reciting vows, placing garlands, participating in rituals as if he were carrying the weight of grief and duty simultaneously. This story leaves haunting questions. If you were the groom, could you have gone through with the wedding? Could you step into a ceremony knowing your bride had just died? Or would tradition, family pressure, and social expectation have felt like chains around your wrists? It is a story that forces you to confront the fragility of life, the weight of tradition, and the collision of love and societal expectation. One moment, celebration. The next, tragedy. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, and everything changed forever. And if you think this case is disturbing, wait until you hear about the groom who died during his own wedding photo shoot, swept away by a raging river just feet from his bride. Another reminder that the line between joy and catastrophe can vanish in an instant. Story number 3. One moment they were laughing, posing for the perfect photo. The next, that same decision would become a tragedy no one could forget. This is the wedding day nightmare that was captured on camera. And the reason the photographer has never returned to the Jinsha River. It was October 1, 2020 in Panzihua, China. A warm holiday morning, soft sunlight spilling over the cliffs, the river stretching like liquid silver for miles. 30-year-old Mr. Chen and his fiancée had arrived early, excitement buzzing through their veins. The plan was simple, a cinematic pre-wedding photo shoot. Yet as beautiful as the scene was, danger lurked silently in its depths. The Jinsha River was famous for its breathtaking views, and infamous for its unpredictable currents. Locals whispered about tourists and thrill-seekers who had underestimated the water, and never returned. Chen and his bride were unaware of the river's reputation. All they saw were cliffs, mist, and a perfect frame for their memories. The photographer crouched behind his camera, studying the composition. He suggested something bold, something daring. The life jackets, let's take them off. It'll look cleaner. More romantic. Chen hesitated. His bride hesitated. But desire for the perfect shot won over caution. A decision that, within minutes, would cost them dearly. The couple stepped closer to the water. Chen balanced on a slick rock, inches above the swirling current. His bride held the hem of her dress, trying to keep it from brushing the icy surface. The camera clicked. What? 3 times. Then, without warning, the river moved. A sudden surge. A silent wall of water, faster than the eye could follow, slammed into the rock beneath Chen's feet. He slipped. For a heartbeat, he surfaced, arms thrashing, voice breaking as he shouted for help. His bride screamed his name, lunging toward him, but the force of the current was relentless. The photographer dropped the camera and dove, but even he could not reach him. The water spun Chen in its grip, dragging him downstream. Seconds stretched into eternities. The river swallowed him, and then there was silence. Rescuers arrived, racing against time. Boats patrolled the raging waters. Drones hovered, scanning the surface for any sign of him. The bride stood on the riverbank, white dress soaked, body trembling violently, praying he would reappear. He never did. Hours later, his body was found miles downstream. The photo that was meant to immortalize their love became the final image of a life cut short. The photographer, haunted, quit for months. He couldn't forgive himself for suggesting the pose. Authorities immediately issued warnings. No photos near the water. No exceptions. No second chances. The story spread like wildfire across China, sparking one question. Was a perfect picture worth a human life? Comments flooded in. Thousands blamed the photographer. Thousands blamed the couple. And thousands more asked themselves the impossible. Would I have taken that risk? Would I have removed my life jacket for one perfect shot, knowing it could be the last picture ever taken of me? Now the question belongs to you. Would you sacrifice safety for beauty? Would you trust a calm morning, a steady hand, a photographer's suggestion, only to see everything vanish in a single instant? The tragedy didn't just end with Chen. It became a cautionary tale for couples, photographers, and thrill-seekers everywhere. A story whispered in studios, retold in galleries, and shared by anyone who understands the thin line between joy and catastrophe. And if you think this story is tragic, wait until you hear about the bride who died during her own ceremony. When a stray celebratory bullet struck her in front of hundreds of guests. Another reminder that life's most joyful moments can transform into unspeakable horror in a heartbeat. Story 4. A single gunshot. One moment, the music was loud, the guests were dancing, and the bride's laughter filled the air. The next, chaos erupted, and life as everyone knew it ended in an instant. This is the wedding that became a funeral, in front of hundreds of witnesses. It was June 2015 in a remote village in Yemen. The sun had set hours earlier, but the celebration was just beginning. Lanterns lit the streets. Children ran between tables laden with food. Music pulsated through the night. Families had gathered from miles away. The bride, just 21, had spent the entire week preparing, henna on her hands, intricate decorations, and a wedding dress that shimmered like moonlight. For her, this day was meant to unite families, to celebrate love, laughter, and the promise of a new life. But in a culture where celebratory gunfire was a long-standing tradition, danger was hiding in plain sight. As night deepened, the music grew louder, the dancing more frenzied. Men lifted rifles to the sky, firing rounds upward in honor of the couple. The bride stood near the stage, bouquet in hand, surrounded by friends and women dancing around her. Then came a moment no one could have anticipated. A close relative, intoxicated and careless, raised his rifle. Rounds cracked into the air. The sharp sound sliced through the music, barely noticed at first. But bullets obey the laws of gravity, and one never returned harmlessly. It curved downward silently, invisibly, and found its mark. A thud. A scream. The bride collapsed. Her white dress bloomed red before anyone could process what had happened. The music stopped instantly. Panic erupted. Women ran screaming. Guests froze in disbelief. The groom fell to his knees, clutching her, shouting her name, shaking her gently in desperation. But the wound was fatal. The bullet had struck her in the head. She was gone before anyone could understand, before anyone could react. The shooter, still in shock, repeated over and over, "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to." Police arrived within minutes, restraining him as the crowd stood in stunned silence. The wedding hall, once a scene of celebration, transformed into a chamber of mourning. Instead of preparing for a honeymoon, the groom was preparing for her burial. The tragedy spread beyond the village, across Yemen, and into international news. Outrage was swift. Many condemned the practice of celebratory gunfire as outdated and entirely preventable. Experts called it one of the most heartbreaking wedding tragedies ever recorded, an avoidable collision of tradition and recklessness. Witnesses later recalled the surreal contrast: the bride's hands, decorated in intricate henna, frozen mid-dance. The table still filled with untouched food. The lanterns swinging gently in the night breeze. And all around, the silence of grief, punctuated by the wailing of family and friends. This story leaves a haunting question. If celebratory gunfire is part of your culture, would you allow it at your own wedding? Should traditions that risk lives be banned completely? It is a story of a moment where joy, ritual, and human error collided, leaving behind grief that will never fade. A moment that reminds us how fragile life is, even amid celebration, and how one careless action can shatter everything in seconds. And if you think this tragedy is shocking, wait until you hear the story of the wedding where the entire dance floor collapsed, sending the bride, groom, and dozens of guests tumbling into the basement below. Story 5. A wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life, but for Sophia and Liam Harris, it became a nightmare that no one could have predicted. One moment they were smiling, holding hands on a sunlit dock, the river shimmering beneath them. The next, the world around them erupted into chaos. Screams. Splashes. A current that wouldn't let go. This is the story of love, joy, and the tragedy that stole it all in a single heartbeat. It was a radiant summer afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina. Sunlight danced on the cobblestone streets, carrying the sweet scent of magnolia through the air. The couple's wedding was moments away. Guests had gathered at a picturesque riverside venue, cameras ready, champagne chilled, laughter and music filling the garden. Sophia, 27, radiant in her flowing dress, held her bouquet with trembling excitement. Liam, 30, eyes full of anticipation, smoothed the lapels of his suit. Friends and family whispered about how inseparable they were, how they had dreamed of this day for years. Everything seemed perfect. But perfection is fragile. The photographer suggested a private moment, a photo shoot on the wooden dock jutting into the river. "It'll be beautiful," he said. "Just the two of you, the sunlight, the water." Sophia and Liam stepped onto the dock, laughing, posing, the gentle summer breeze tugging at her veil. A few friends and family watched from the shore, capturing candid smiles and laughter. They were happy, oblivious to the danger that lurked beneath. And then the first warning arrived, a sharp, ominous crack that echoed across the river. The old wooden boards had weakened over years of exposure to water and sun. Before anyone could react, the dock gave way beneath them. Time slowed. Sophia screamed, reaching for Liam's hand. He lunged, but the river was faster. The current gripped them instantly. Water swallowed them whole. Guests' screams pierced the air as cameras and phones tumbled into the river alongside them. Panic erupted. Nearby boaters and friends dove in. Shouts rang out over the water. But the current was merciless, spinning them under, tossing them into unseen depths. Each second felt like an eternity. Each heartbeat carried fear, helplessness, disbelief. For a fleeting moment, Sophia's hand brushed Liam's, a desperate attempt to hold on. And then, silence. Rescue crews arrived minutes later. Boats patrolled frantically. Divers plunged into the swift-moving waters, searching for any sign of life. Hours passed. And then the news came. Bodies recovered. Sophia and Liam, gone. Family members described the scene as surreal, a nightmare masquerading as reality. Photographs taken moments before the collapse showed radiant smiles, perfect poses, unaware of the tragedy to come. The contrast between joy and loss was haunting, almost unbearable. Sophia's sister whispered, her voice trembling, "It was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, and yet, it became the day we lost them forever." The incident sent shockwaves through the local community. Questions piled up. Could anything have been done differently? Should the dock have been inspected? Could the photographer have anticipated the danger? No answer brought comfort. But in tragedy there is also a lesson: the fragility of life, the thin line between celebration and catastrophe, and the reminder that even the most joyous moments can vanish in an instant. As friends and family mourned, the river continued to flow, indifferent to human sorrow. The laughter, music, and sunlight that had marked Sophia and Liam's day were gone, replaced with silence, grief, and memories frozen in photographs they would never live to enjoy. And if you think this story is tragic, wait until you hear about another bride and groom, whose wedding day photo shoot by a river ended with the groom being swept away by a raging current. Another reminder that even the most beautiful moments can transform into unimaginable horror. Story number 6. Some journeys are meant to be unforgettable. But for Marcus and Isabel Reynolds, their honeymoon would become a fight for survival that ended in tragedy. Imagine stepping into the wilderness, far from everything familiar, the forest stretching endlessly, shadows deepening as the sun sinks behind towering pines, and realizing that nature doesn't negotiate. This is the story of adventure, love, and the unforgiving power of the wild. It was early October, deep in the forests of Oregon. Marcus, 32, and Isabel, 29, had just exchanged vows. The wedding was perfect, intimate, full of laughter, promises, and dreams for the future. But their idea of celebration was unconventional, a backcountry camping trip, far from hotels, cell towers, and city distractions. Backpacks loaded, tents strapped, they ventured deeper into the towering pines, the scent of earth and pine needles filling the crisp autumn air. The river beside which they pitched their tents sparkled under the golden sunlight, a postcard-perfect scene. They laughed, they cooked, they toasted marshmallows over a crackling fire. For a moment, it felt as though the world had shrunk to just the two of them. But the wilderness is unpredictable, and it doesn't bend to human plans. As night fell, a sudden chill swept through the forest. The temperature dropped sharply, condensation forming on the tent walls. Rain began falling, not a gentle drizzle but sheets of icy water turning trails into treacherous mud. The river, once calm, swelled into a dangerous torrent, roaring as if warning the couple to retreat. By the next morning, panic had set in elsewhere. Search and rescue received a frantic call from Marcus. "We can't cross the river. The current is too strong. Stay calm. Help us if you can." Friends and family traced their steps, only to find an abandoned campsite. The tent was shredded, battered by wind and rain. Footprints vanished in the mud, swallowed by the elements. The footbridge they had crossed the previous day was gone, swept away by the swollen river. Somehow they had attempted the crossing anyway. And the river, a merciless predator, had claimed them. Search teams worked tirelessly for days, divers plunging into icy waters, scanning under logs and debris. Every hour without a sighting deepened the dread. And then the unthinkable, their bodies were recovered side by side. Hands entwined. Eyes closed. A final, silent testament to the bond they had shared, even in the face of death. Family and friends struggled to comprehend. They wanted adventure, Isabel's brother whispered, voice breaking. But sometimes the wild doesn't care who you are, or how much you love each other. The tragedy spread through the community, a stark reminder of how fragile life can be. Couples, hikers, and adventurers were forced to confront a chilling truth. Love and courage are not always enough to survive nature's fury. Witnesses described the scene as haunting. The river still raging, swirling leaves and branches over its surface, indifferent to the lives it had taken. The forest, once serene and welcoming, had become a silent grave, the echoes of the couple's laughter now replaced with an eternal silence. This story leaves a haunting question. Would you risk everything for a fleeting moment of adventure? Would you cross a raging river if your life, and the life of someone you love, hung in the balance? And yet, there is something profoundly human in their story. A reminder that love doesn't vanish even in death. That courage, even when it fails, leaves an imprint that cannot be erased. Marcus and Isabel's story ends here, but the line between thrill and tragedy continues for others. And the next story is even more shocking. Tap your screen to keep watching.